Thank y'all so much. What an honor to be here. Scott, introduction is appreciated. He read it just like I wrote it. Oh, graduates, we salute you. We appreciate your attention to all you've had to go through for the last 3 years. It's not easy. It wasn't easy 40 years ago, and it's not gotten a bit easier. And to all of you students who are approaching your junior year and then your freshman year and so forth, and you'll be graduating for long, Alabama as a state and our economy appreciate you. Now, when Jason Isbell and Scott Miller, your registrar, came to see me to invite me to be your commencement speaker and to talk with me about what did you want to hear, they assured me it had nothing to do with the progress Alabama was making on any front. They wanted to know what was it like way back then. So join me today with some very relaxed words about traveling down memory lane. The whole story can be titled, "Necessity is the Mother of Invention." I finished Auburn University 1967 as a high school teacher in secondary education, majoring in English and speech and social studies. And in California, it was where I did my first teaching. Imagine that, an English teacher in Rio Linda Senior High School. My husband was in the military, and we were out there at McClellan Air Force Base, poised, church mice, lived in base housing, and as a captain, he wasn't making much money, and so I needed to go to work. So I finally got a job at Rio Linda Senior High School teaching English. Well, guess what? Part of what I had to teach was one semester of civics, the other semester of economics to my seniors. I knew nothing about California government. The only thing I knew when we got there was the bumper stickers on the cars. Ronald Reagan was running against Pat Brown for governor, and the bumper sticker said, "If it's brown, flush it." Necessity is the mother of invention. What was I going to do? I didn't have time to learn California government or California civics, yet I was going to have a class to teach for a semester. Well, necessity is the mother of invention. So I got down the yellow pages of the telephone book. Now remember, I'm from Wilcox County, Alabama. I'm going to teach English in the public schools of California. Yeah, that in itself was sort of striking to those folks out there. Yet they were using the same civics textbook that I used at Wilcox County High School back in Camden, Alabama. So they're not all that special either. But anyway, I got down the yellow pages of the telephone book and started finding any business leader that I could find, whether it was a banker, a car dealer, investment banker, anybody that had any wisdom to share with my seniors about how to be practical about managing your money. So we brought in civic leaders from around Sacramento, California, and the community to teach my students civics. Today, you and I would know that is teaching them financial literacy. Fast forward. Several years later, we got out of the military and moved to Mobile, started a veterinary practice, and therefore we didn't get to Mobile in time to start teaching in the public schools in time. So I went to work at the vet clinic, and it didn't take me long to figure out that that was not where I needed to be, married to one of the partners and dealing with the other partners. So I needed to go get a job. But if you can't teach, what can you do? What job do you go after? Necessity is the mother of invention. Simply because as being an English teacher and a speech teacher, I thought surely I could do something in the field of public relations, though I didn't really know what that was. So I approached the bank that we were doing business with near the vet clinic, went to the personnel department, and presented my resume, etc., and said, "I'd like to join your public relations department." They smiled and said, "Well, we don't have a public relations department." I smiled and said, "You're the largest bank sitting in the middle of the largest school system in the state of Alabama. Y'all ought to be growing customers." Growing customers, they said. I said, "Yeah." these students in these schools are going to be borrowing money one day, and they're going to have a bank account and might even have a savings account. And one of these days, they might have a credit card. You need to grow customers. Again, Clarence Keller in personnel smiled and said, well, we don't have that kind of a department. I smiled and said, thank you, and left. I still didn't have a job. Fast forward to several weeks, the bank called back and said, would you come talk to us about growing customers? I said, certainly. So I went back down to Merchants National Bank and met with them and described for them the experience I'd had teaching in California. The idea is to take bankers into the public schools, into particularly the math teachers and the English teachers, and teach those students why learning math is important. You know, you got to balance a checkbook. You might want to borrow money. You might want to learn how to add up your investments and calculate your interest. And also you need to learn some English. You might want to have a letter of resume. Today we would call that financial literacy. So that was my proposal to the personnel department at Merchants National Bank, to grow customers. Send the bankers, one or more, into the classrooms upon invitation. Well, they sort of shook their head, you know. But they said, well, come on, we'll try. So, being a teacher, I was ready to go. And I was planning on going to high school, at least 9, 10, 11, 12 graders. And so the bank officers there communicated with all the educators in the community and so forth and described this service and what we were going to do, and nobody called. Nobody called to invite me to come to that classroom. But we were patient, and finally, a teacher in Pritchard, Alabama, invited me to come and teach the 6th grade assembly. 6th grade, going to be 100 students there. Now, I'm prepared for the senior high school, you know. What do you tell 6th graders about banking? Again, necessity is the mother of invention. This was my first and only invitation. Had to make it good. So I came up with some kind of little presentation, got me some posters, and played like posters were going to describe a house. And I took a match, you know, I was going to light the house in its own fire and squirt it out with a water pistol and show them that banks have safety, like safe deposit boxes. But here again, 6th graders. But okay, I'm ready to go. So I told Clarence Keller, and Lowell, his assistant, was with us, so I said, I'll meet y'all down the corner. So when they turned the corner and picked me up, I had my CC, my little poodle, black poodle, dressed up, because CC would do tricks. And I thought, okay, this would be my key to how I keep the attention of the students. If they'll behave and listen, they'll get to see tricks by the dog. So we'll see it. When I was waiting on the corner down that street and Mr. Keller drove up and I got in with my dog, I know right then he thought, oh my goodness, Merchants National Bank's gone to the dogs. He was holding his breath the whole time. So off we go to Pritchard. And we get there, and sure enough, 6th graders. So Cece was well trained, and so I'd put her off stage and bring her on stage and let her wave, and then she'd flip. Then I'd send her back off stage, and I said, y'all get to see the dog if y'all will listen. So that's how we went through that first experience teaching students about banking, safety, banks, safe deposit boxes, and the dog and I kept their attention. So long story short, I had been hired by the bank to start this school program, and that was still my only invitation. So we kept working on it, and finally it caught on, and so the senior high teachers began to invite me. And that was good, and so I left the dog at home, and we talked about other things about banking that would be relevant to high school students to help them understand the importance of banking And the whole idea is if they got to know somebody from, quote, Merchants National Bank, then when they got ready to do banking, they might go to Merchants National Bank to open an account or whatever, to do their business. So we were growing customers was the idea. Well, that worked on for Merchants National Bank quite well. At the same time, there was an organization called Alabama Young Bankers. Does that still exist? Alabama Young Bankers? And so they picked up the idea of a school relations program. And then the other banks in Mobile picked up on it, and I shared with all of them my curriculum, the different subjects that I was prepared to teach per class, shared it with them. And so for several years, our banking education program went statewide, and we were trying to grow customers through doing a good service for our teachers and our students. And then finally, the idea caught on board with the American Bankers Association, and I was on loan to American Bankers Association for a year. We had a pilot program in 3 states, as I recall, and we set the program up in those 3 states. But long story short, my banking career began because necessity is the mother of invention. And Merchants National Bank gave me the start, and I'm always grateful to Merchants National Bank at MNB, where you're the MIP. You're the most important person at Merchants National Bank. So that's the way we did, and then I matriculated in the bank to the marketing department and continued to work there for a little over 10 years, and I was one of the first women in Alabama banks to become assistant vice president. In banking, I noticed when I was in marketing, the teller line. Y'all, that's the first contact any customer has with a bank, is the teller. And yet it was my observation that they were the last to get trained about how to do business development. So I started a program in our bank to teach our tellers all of the services of the bank and what customers might say or indicate that would give them a clue, so the teller could recommend to the customer that you go over here to this installment loan department over here and meet with Billy or meet with Mary. But that was sort of a unique situation at the time. Whoever thought the tellers needed to know anything except how to cash a check and make change? But I say to you again, in real life Alabama, today, whoever is the first line of contact in whatever business you're in is the most important person. So be sure you pay attention and put some of your training experience in those frontline contacts. So we're working along as Alabama Young Bankers, and we're all out in the schools doing the school relations program. And you know, Young Bankers, just like Alabama Bankers, has offices, and you rise through the ranks. So I became president of Alabama Young Bankers. We hosted our first, my first convention that was held over here at Gulf Shores and we had the first convention in what used to be the Gulf State Park Lodge. The Hurricanes got it, and now it's, we're building a new one down there in that same location. But at that convention, we had Paul Harvey as our main speaker, and so that Young Banker Convention will always be remembered in a special way, for sure. But then Alabama Young Bankers, after I was president, then I was appointed to chair the Banking Education Committee. Now at that point in time, y'all may remember that the president of Alabama Bankers was Mary George Waite of Center, Alabama, Cherokee County, and she had the Red Hot team. Hot Glass was a vice president, and Red Barrett was a vice president. So she said she had the Red Hot team. And then she appointed Kay Ivey as chairman of the banking education. And Mary George, at that time, was the first female president of any bankers association in the United States. Start a banking school. I'd never done that before. Bottom line is, at that time, everybody knew about LSU Graduate School of Banking. And LSU was for those folks who absolutely knew they were going to stay in banking for their full career and had some intentions of going up through the ranks to become a senior officer and or president or CEO. But that path of ascension didn't necessarily apply to all of us in banking. And I sensed the need that we had a need for a school in Alabama that would focus on operations and some marketing and some of those things that are absolutely essential to running a bank, even though you're not going to necessarily be the senior vice president or the executive vice president and the CEO. So that was sort of the initiative of the ABS, Alabama Banking School. And so it felt my job to flesh it out and work with the respective committees that Scott mentioned. And one of the things was we had to have a location. So we put out notice through the Alabama Banking Association that we were thinking about starting a banking school. And the University of Alabama applied, and Auburn University applied, as I recall, and also the University of South Alabama. Now, here I am, a banker down here in Merchants National Bank in Mobile. So obviously everybody said, oh, well, Mobile, she's picking a home favorite. Well, that's not how Ivey does business. Bottom line is I was charged with doing the very best we could for the association and the students. So I interviewed each one of the 3 campuses and heard their proposals, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, the University of South Alabama gave the best proposal in my view. It was also the most cost effective. Never mind, we started over there on, what do you call it, Brooklyn Field, and it wasn't very plush at all. But it was what we could get by with. We needed it. It was sort of an isolated area. It wasn't crowded with any other competing interest. And so I selected University of South Alabama to start the location to start the Alabama Banking School. Interesting experience. That was my first eye-opening experience about the difference in the role between the president of the association, Alabama Banking Association, and the executive director. I thought the president of the association was in charge, and that the executive director of the association, carried out whatever the president wanted. I learned quite quickly that the executive director at that point in time was very strong in his own view of what ought to happen related to the association. And he was very much for the University of Alabama. That's fine, good, wonderful institution. But folks, it was my job to make the recommendation based on the criteria, and I thought cost effectiveness and affordability, et cetera. So anyway, I learned clearly the distinction between the executive director and the president of the organization, something you all may want to still be aware of. But anyway, so the board that was making the final decision went with my recommendation to locate the school here at the University of South Alabama. And I believe you're glad we did. I think it's worked out well for you. So when you think about being a success in banking, remember your customer always comes first. And banking has changed in 40 years, no question. It's going to change even more in the next 10 years. The economy and technology makes things ever-changing. So with this school, I hope it helps you adapt to those things. And I am very delighted and proud to be a part of this institution. I had the privilege of attending banking school and also of serving on its first board of directors. So I'm invested in your school with you. I'm proud of you. And the milestones I mentioned about being one of the first women in banking to be assistant vice president and the first female chair of the Alabama Banking Committee. And now as the 54th governor of the great state of Alabama, I'm the first Republican woman and the only second woman in Alabama's history to serve as governor. I am honored to be here today. I'm honored to serve as governor, and I look forward to applauding these graduates as we say, well done. And remember, necessity is the mother of invention.